Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Ukraine war news update, a military aid update that's been long overdue. I've got an awful lot of stuff to get through, but I've got to take my boy to football practice this evening. And I need to give my brain a rest. So I don't know if I can finish this video. I have that much stuff to talk about. There's an awful lot going on. So what I'm going to do is go really quickly into it. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. As I often say, it makes a difference to the channel and keeps you in the loop. So please remember to click the bell icon. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's get into the details. So, oh, look, I'm still here. Welcome everyone to the live stream. Just before we start on what is going on, I want to remind people to pop along to atpgeo.com/UK petition. This will now direct you to a new petition, which is the same petition, but it's now become an official UK petition, like a governmental petition. Mark, my friend, Little Whiskey Shop Mark, has done a really good job of putting this petition together for UK defensive border and rear air logistics support to Ukraine, to get troops out to support in the rear in Ukraine, in the western Ukraine, etc., etc. It's all detailed here. You can only sign this if you're a UK. It's literally just gone live, so that's why there's only 22 signatures. You can only sign this if you're a UK citizen. But if you're not, please share it, especially to people you know who are British. It is really important that we get this up to 10,000 signatures. The government will respond officially to the petition. 100,000, and it will be considered for debate in Parliament. So that's just recently happened with, I think, the Russian investigation into Russian interference in UK politics. That got to 100,000. So, you know, we're hoping that we can at least get some traction with this. Please help out. That would be absolutely fantastic. Mark's done a really good job with that. Okay, let's get on to support to Ukraine. And we're going to start with funding and the 90 billion euro loan that the EU is putting to Ukraine. You know, not using the frozen Russian assets, or at least maybe somewhat using it. I don't know. It's all a bit complicated, but they're originally going to try and get the full assets to be given to Ukraine. That didn't happen. There wasn't enough support for that, but now there's this 90 billion euro loan. 60 billion we now know is going to go to military aid, and 30 billion to support the budget in Ukraine. Brussels reserves the right to use frozen Russian assets if needed. First disbursements are expected in the second quarter 2 of 2026. Now, what's interesting here is that France has come out and said, actually, and funnily enough, I think you're going to find much more support for this going forward with what's going on with Greenland. France has come out and said, we want that money to be spent inside Europe, and that's completely understandable. Now, I presume that's going to be inside the EU. I'd be interested to see whether BAE Systems and British companies can get a look in on that funding. But France is unsurprisingly seeking that there's a strict condition to buy only European weapons. It will strengthen the European defense industry and strategic autonomy, and that, you know, that money will stay in Europe. It's opposed by the Netherlands, which believes that excessive restrictions will deprive Ukraine of the opportunity to quickly obtain critically needed systems. However, I wonder what they would think now with what's going on in Greenland. Interesting news just coming out that I said that Vladimir Putin has been given a position, a place at the board of peace by Donald Trump. Donald Trump has now given another seat to Lukashenko, the Belarusian dictator. I mean, you couldn't make this stuff up. Donald Trump is just, honestly, he's changed sides. The United States government appears to have just joined in with a bunch of autocracies around the world. Anyway, I digress. Finland is sending its 31st defense package to Ukraine worth 98 million euros, raising its total support to 3.1 billion euros over the course of the war. The Defense Ministry has announced the decision was approved by the president's on the 16th. We don't know what will be in that package, and we never do with the Finns. They are secretive about what they give to Ukraine. Finland will deliver that. The 31st package is fast-tracked to meet urgent battlefield needs. So you can make of that what you will. I guess they need air defense interceptors, but I don't know that Finland particularly makes many of them. Maybe they have some in their inventories. They do make shells there in Finland. So it'd be interesting to know what is in that package, but we don't. Now, moving on to tangible aid bits of equipment that are going to Ukraine. Several Ukrainian air defense systems ran out of missiles recently. A new shipment arrived, though, the morning that Zelensky admitted this. It is obviously really challenging if Ukraine just simply doesn't have the missiles to send from their systems. I presume that's going to be with regard to Patriot missiles. He noted that munitions are now in Ukraine, but come at a heavy cost in lives and effort, and probably a lot of money as well. And I wonder if that, I mean, including that there are lots of American missiles that do get. So I'm not to say that it's definitely American missiles here, but that seemed to be the understanding that at least I was under the impression of. But they do use air-to-air missiles, the AIM-9X, don't they, in the NASAMS, which is the Norwegian-American co-production. I don't know if Norway produces their own interceptors. We're going to come on to that later because they're going to support Ukraine building their own interceptors for the NASAMS, which is interesting. But there are American missiles that do get used outside of the Patriot system. Now, obviously, this new Tempest that uses the Hellfire missile too. But anyway, that's much smaller scope demand for those. Poland will send up to 9 MiG. So we heard 6 to 8. Originally, it was possibly going to be more, as they are making a whole bunch obsolete. I can't remember what the number was. Was it something like 21, MiG 29, something like that? Then they said, "Oh, we're going to send 6 to 8 of these to Ukraine." It could be that a bunch of them aren't operational. Maybe they're much more useful for parts and whatnot. Poland will send up to 9 MiG-29 jets to Ukraine, according to the Deputy Defense Minister, confirming to TVP World. The deal will involve a tech swap with Kyiv providing drone technologies in return. Zalewski, the minister or deputy minister, said Ukraine has likely agreed with only technical details left to finalize. So that is really good news. However, not so good coming from Czechia. We'll come to that in a second. First, we'll start with Czech firms supplying military materials worth approximately 11 billion euros under the ammunition initiative for Ukraine, according to Prime Minister Andrej Babiš and Deputy Prime Minister Karel Havlicek. They announced that Czechia is acting as a coordinator and transporter, securing global ammunition stockpiles and arranging financing. They have kept that going. That was thought to be under pressure, and it might have been stopped by the present coalition government. They've kept that on. However, Petr Pavel, who's a president, very supportive of Ukraine, former NATO guy, went to the Czech president went to Kyiv the other day to meet with Zelensky. He said that they can provide several medium combat aircraft in a relatively short time frame, which are very effective in combating drones. He added that Czech Republic can also supply Ukraine with early warning systems such as passive radars. Although Pavel did not disclose details about the aircraft, it could be the Czech-made L-159 light attack aircraft for training and combat. So he said it was going to be resolved quickly and successfully, is what Petr Pavel said. However, this is the likely jet, the L-159. Czech coalition government under Andrej Babiš has now blocked the sale to Ukraine of these, despite the president backing it. Czech speaker Tomio Okamura, who does not like Ukraine, is much more pro-Russian, opposes selling these jets to Ukraine, citing a gap between the aircraft's low residual value and high replacement costs. So that seems to have put an end to that, which is devastating, I think, for Ukraine. As you think, yeah, they're going to get some extra equipment. That looks pretty useful, nice. And then, unfortunately, doesn't seem to come to fruition at all there. But there you go. Okay, moving on. We hear that Ukraine will receive Spanish air defense radars capable of detecting targets up to a distance of 460 kilometers. Spanish Council of Ministers has approved a contract for the production and supply of Lanza LTR-25 radar systems and their logistical support. They're capable of detecting and tracking tracking aircraft, drones, and other targets at a distance of up to 460 kilometers in conditions of active countermeasures by electronic warfare. The Spanish radars will significantly increase the effectiveness of the Ukrainian air defense system. The estimated cost of the contract is 37 million euros, and the deadline is December the 31st this year. The exact number of radars intended for Ukraine was not specified, but I believe they look something like that. So these will be placed very much in the rear. Be a bit of a target for the Russians, of course, but yeah, that's good news if the Ukrainians can get themselves a hold of some of these Spanish Lanza LTR-25 tactical early detection radars. So good on Spain for that, or at least, I mean, you say good on Spain, but again, it's a case of selling them. You know, it's not that these are being provided for free for kind of governmental support. But anyway, will be very useful. Now, Destinus, which is a European, I presume a pan-European tech firm or military tech firm, has introduced the updated Ruta missile drone. It's a Ruta 2 Block 2, the first version of which was tested in Ukraine. Destinus introduced a new Ruta Block 2 cruise missile. Previously, the manufacturer supplied the Ukrainians with the first version of this development, the Ruta drone missile. The company describes the Block 2 as an autonomous cruise missile against stationary targets. The weapon's range is over 450 kilometers, and a weight of the warhead is 250 kilograms. So that is a nice bit of warhead on that. The missile is classified as a medium range weapon, so it's not, you know, you super long, it's not going to get to Yelabuga, but that is going to be nice for hitting within occupied territories, within Crimea, possibly, I don't know, what's the 450 kilometers, so that should reach the other side of the Sea of Azov, should be able to reach nicely into Russian oblasts as well. So a useful bit of kit there. So it's been unveiled. It's got a 250 kilogram warhead, AI guidance, stealth enhancements. It's built by Destinus, designed to defeat Russian air defenses and reflects Ukraine's leap in domestic missile capability amid the ongoing war. So I'd love them to get a whole bunch of them on board. We're looking forward to a UK similar cruise missile. The break stop, we're looking at a UK ballistic missile. We're looking at the Narwhal from Czechia as well as their own, like Ukrainian's own, a Long Neptune, and their hybrid sort of drone missiles themselves that they use, the Paliantsia, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of kit that they can throw at the Russians. I wonder whether some of their military facilities, manufacturing facilities, have been hit recently, because they seem to be firing less than they were, fewer missiles, and drones than they were maybe 3 weeks ago. Were they stockpiling to do those big attacks, or have they had facilities hit or depots struck? We don't know. Okay, moving on. I'm going at quite a clip here. I'm sure you would appreciate that, though. Let's talk statistics, says German aid to Ukraine. According to Dennis Shmyhal, the now energy minister, so former defense minister, Ukraine received 23 long and medium range air defense systems, including 4 MIM-104 Patriot air defense systems from Western partners in 2025. 23 long and medium range. That is pretty impressive. And 4 Patriot air defense systems last year they received. Now, judging by these numbers, Germany, which has delivered 3 IRIS-T SLM fire units and 2 MIM-104 Patriot fire units in 2025, was responsible for around 21.7% of these air defense system deliveries. In particular, 50% of all Patriot deliveries to Ukraine. So Germany's really stepping up, right? Which we already know, right? Norway, Denmark, and Lithuania assisted the German Patriot deliveries with funding. In addition, according to Shmyhal, Ukraine has received more than 2.4 million artillery shells in 2025. Assuming the deliveries promised by Germany, almost 500,000 shells have been carried out as planned. Unfortunately, I can only confirm the figures up to April 2025. That's when the Germans stopped publishing their stuff publicly. Germany was responsible for more than 20% of all artillery shell deliveries in Ukraine last year. Now, furthermore, 23 nations have participated in the Pearl Initiative, pledging more than $5 billion. Germany's contribution amounts to $700 million, or around 14% of those Pearl, the Pearl funding. So Germany is really significant in the aid it's giving to Ukraine. Very, very much so. And that's a nice synopsis there from Germany to Ukraine. Right, arms manufacturing giant, the German Rheinmetall, has received a site in Ukraine to build a munitions production plant, which is something they've been looking to do. The company says via Ukrinform, Rheinmetall is fulfilling its commitments and already has an active contract to supply equipment for the future factory. I wonder how quickly they can get that up and running and producing for the Ukrainians. Now, Ukraine is holding off on additional orders for strike drones from the German Helsing company due to problems in frontline tests and battles. So this was, you had the original, what was it, HQ something, and then you've now got the HX2. And this is this supposedly autonomous AI, or at least AI assisted drone that the Germans are producing. And I've talked about previously, and that really kind of people were very upbeat about this drone, but it's had trouble taking off in tests and lacks some AI components, and was also affected by jamming near the front that severed connections with operators. So this is not good news for the German company. Ukraine holds off on new Helsing drone orders after setbacks, and there were quite a lot of these that were due to go, and they were fairly reasonable in price. So I think this is quite an attractive deal previously. Germany doesn't plan a follow-up order for the drones until there's an expression of interest from Ukraine, and Helsing has rejected many of the findings presented to it, saying the company is confident in HX2's test performance and ability to translate well into high hit rates on the battlefield. So, yeah, we'll have to see if anything develops there. Now, onto the UK. This is Zelensky spoke recently as the ambassador, although he's stepping down from ambassador, I think this month, next month, maybe. The UK has provided Ukraine with £21 billion. So that's what, I don't know how that equates. It's going to be probably over $25 billion, sorry, and more euros as well. Than that, in support since the start of the full-scale Russian invasion. So the UK has been very considerable in their support for Ukraine. And mechanism of using profits from frozen Russian assets to finance Ukraine's defense has become a practical precedent for a new approach to the responsibility of the aggressor. So we've been using, it appears, frozen Russian assets pretty well there, at least according to Zelensky. Now, starting in February, Ukraine and the UK will jointly produce. So I was wondering about the timing on this. Now, it seems like it's going to be February. These are the Octopus interceptor drones, look very similar to the Wild Hornet Sting drone, possibly just a little bit bigger. We are going to be producing thousands of Octopus interceptor drones each month. Now, they're already producing some of these. I think they're producing them in a number of places around Europe, possibly. I think they might have given the license out to a number of people, and they're producing them back in Ukraine as well. Sorry, just waving to a baby. And that is really good news that very soon they're going to be having thousands of these a month. It obviously takes time to build up the infrastructure to manufacture these. Now, I was wondering about this the other day. I love it sometimes where I just have these kind of moments where I have a bit of a wonder, right? Think about something, and then like the next day, there's a video that comes out to answer my question. I'm like, oh, there you go. I was wondering the other day about Stormer air defense systems that the British provided really early on in the war. These are self-propelled short-range air defense systems that are equipped with the excellent Starstreak missile launchers. So these are really good air defense missiles. We heard about them being used. We even saw footage of them targeting drones and whatnot. And then they've gone on the lowdown recently. We haven't really heard much. Well, now footage of a British Stormer air defense system has come out defending Ukraine's skies, equipped with the Starstreak missile launchers. They first arrived in 2022. So these have been going strong. And I'm not sure I'm aware of any that have been taken out, but I might be wrong there. So they have been active for quite some time, and they are still apparently active. So that's really, really good news there. Now, UAMAM Ukraine, according to French forces, France is currently training Ukrainians to maintain the VAB armored personnel carriers. Now, these are carriers they already have. So they've, just to give you the context here, France is phasing out the VAB APCs, armored personnel carriers. They are your pretty bog standard pieces of kit. Let's APC, VAB. Oops, no, that's not going to get you anywhere. VAB, APC. So véhicules de l'avant blindé. They look something like that. Okay, so that's a VAB. It's now obsolete in the French army. Decent enough bit of APC, you know, fairly typical APC. They've got quite a lot of these. This was the mainstay of the French army. They're now being replaced with a replacement. Can't remember what it is, but and France did a really cool thing, which is they said that we are going to supply Ukraine. We're going to give Ukraine the first dibs on any obsolete vehicles or any obsolete equipment that we get rid of. And that means that Ukraine get the first right to say, yeah, we'll have them. And so they've been getting these VABs as they get replaced. And we've already seen these lost quite frequently on the loss list from like Oryx, which is what you'd expect. They're going to get them in, they're going to use them, and they're going to lose them because that's war. But France has got quite a few of these, and it's going to be great to see them get more. And if they are currently training Ukrainians on these, it means they continue to train them because they're going to give more and more of these to Ukraine. So I think the implication here is that they are going to receive some VABs fairly soon from France. They're receiving training on maintenance of these VAB armored personnel carriers that it continues to supply for Ukraine. It can therefore be inferred that a new batch of VABs will soon be transferred to Ukraine, says French aid to Ukraine. Good news there. Now, the Embassy of Japan has transferred several Toyota HMV SUVs to Ukraine. Toyota HMV has a 4x4 wheel arrangement, 170 horsepower diesel engine. It is capable of transporting 8 to 10 servicemen with full equipment. So the Japanese provided a bunch of vehicles previously to Ukraine. And yeah, still continuing to do so. So that's good news there. Then we're going to go on to the Tempest vehicle. Now, I talked about this already, done these several times, but bringing it together for this military aid video. They've got two of these prototypes. They are buggies with 2 Hellfire missiles, air-to-air missiles that are sent from the ground here. Two prototypes are in service with the Ukrainians, and they've already accounted apparently for 21 downed Russian drones. So that's absolutely fantastic. You can go and see a video of these things being used and shown off and whatnot. And in fact, there's now a video, I think I showed it to you this morning, didn't I, of a Tempest being used to shoot down a drone. So we've not only had the claim that they shot down 21, but you can see one actually being used to shoot down a drone. They fire these Hellfire missiles. I don't know how many Hellfires the Ukrainians have got. It's one of the weapons, and in fact, there's a use of one there. Hellfires were one of the weapons that Pete Hegseth stopped going to Ukraine and then sent to the Middle East instead, because Pete Hegseth, he thought that's what Trump wanted, and actually it wasn't. And that was one of the controversies of stopping weapons going to Ukraine. Anyway, that's a Tempest with the Hellfire missiles. And yeah, there was a video that I showed you of one shooting down something during the daytime. Now we're going to go to this article in Euromaidan Press, a weapon to surpass fiber optic drones, but it needs more time in the oven. So there's this American company called Epirus who has created the Leonidas microwave weapon. It appears to make a fiber-equipped quadcopter suddenly crash to the ground. We have seen some images of stuff like this happening. I've seen a bunch of drones fall out the sky from these microwave weapons being used. Fiber optic, no problem. So that includes fiber optic drones as well. The company boasts in a video. The Leonidas has been tested on conventional drones with what the company described as 100% success rate under controlled conditions. Being able to bring down drones that are immune to conventional jamming sounds like an even bigger deal. Fiber optic drones have become common across Ukrainian battlefields. In the past 2 years, some Ukrainian brigades now estimate 30 to 50% of Russian drones are indeed fiber optic ones. However, directed energy weapons like Leonidas are unlikely to be practical on Ukraine's battlefield, at least for now. Quote from a December analysis by the RAND Corporation: while directed energy weapons are an appealing technological pursuit which can affect multiple targets at once and reduce reliance on munitions, these systems present significant practical limitations for Ukraine, according to that analysis. Even advanced US and UK systems are not yet ready to be deployed at scale, they claim. This their low at use costs mark significant R&D investments, and DEW systems have significant infrastructure requirements and atmospheric sensitivities. So although when you use these things, the same with a laser, the Dragonfire laser, for example, costs what, 10p to fire, or £1 to fire one of these things, can hit within a kilometer, like something the size of a pound coin. Brilliant, but they're going to the cost comes from the R&D, right? And you're putting in loads of effort into like designing these things and manufacturing them. When you use them, cheapest ships to use, probably the same with this microwave weapon, but then you're likely to need lots of power to do so, which is fine if you're on board a ship, right? And that's where these Dragonfire laser ones were really designed for originally. You're on board a ship, you want to protect your ship from drone attacks, you're firing these lasers off, yeah, happy days, and you've got the raw power of the ship's engines and whatnot to be able to drive these weapons. But if you're rolling these out to the middle of a trench line or whatever, where you're going to get the very intensive energy requirements from. Anyway, it can fire in broad bursts, this Leonidas, focus pulses at specific threats. It exists in both stationary and vehicle mounted versions and can reach ranges of 2 kilometers. Wow, that's a pretty good range, though the company is working to double that to 4 kilometers through the US Army's $43.5 million grant. I mean, something like this would be where I would be putting a ton of effort into making sure that these are cheap enough and widespread enough in your army, because if we're entering into an era of drones, then you need really good counter drone capabilities. Next generation is also supposed to raise peak power output by 30%, extend pulse durations, add a burst fire mode, and improve the batteries. Epirus says that each shot costs just $0.05, so that's 5 cents. Wow, so it costs 5 cents to fire these things. Super cheap indeed. Where was I? Because it moves. Sorry, the Euromide Impress website, because it has so many pop-up adverts that are obviously desperate for income. The adverts keep popping up and they shift the text up and down. If you see me reading from Euromide Impress articles and you're wondering why the pages go up and down all the time, it's not because I'm moving them, it's because it moves itself. So you're reading the text and then suddenly the text is up there and you don't know what's happened. Anyway, just a bit of a pet peeve there. So very cheap anyway compared to ammo consuming weapons. However effective it is on a testing range, it remains unproven in real battlefield conditions, much like other weapons of its class. According to Defense Express, at current ranges, the Leonidas fills the same niche as anti-air guns, but its bulk makes it more vulnerable. Destroyed units are harder and more expensive to replace than lower tech alternatives. And the energy-hungry weapon also requires a reliable power supply. This, to me, is the big challenge, and can generally engage targets within visual range. This is a tall order in Ukraine, where drones can suddenly appear from anywhere, and the environment is often swathed in fog during the colder months. Current Ukrainian defense needs would be better served by other capabilities than that can more immediately provide affordable mass, Rand wrote. However, Rand added that this technology should be actively monitored and may be viable in the future. In the meantime, Ukraine has a standing offer to defense companies to come test their toys out in a real battle. So this is a great place for Leonidas to come and say, okay, we're going to provide you with a couple of these to see actually how usable they are, how useful they are in battlefield conditions. It's the sort of thing I'd imagine would be really good for like a ship again, where you've got open skies and you can see drones coming in, you can maybe detect them more easily, and then use things like the lasers and microwaves to shoot them out of the sky. But again, trying to get these close to the front line where you've got drones flying all over the place and you've got trees and hills and buildings, I think it is more of a challenge, as exciting as these weapons do sound. Okay, now moving on to humanitarian equipment here. European manufacturers of demining machines have increased supplies to Ukraine. Leading European manufacturers of mechanized demining machines, the Croatian DOK, ING, and the GCS, which we've seen, I think that's the GCS, isn't it? we've seen quite a few of these go to Ukraine, with headquarters in Switzerland, have increased the number of equipment operating in Ukraine to 135 units. So they really have got a number of these out. There are so many different ways of demining. Obviously, handheld devices. They've got a lot of drones flying over fields and mapping out fields and detecting metal and whatnot. They've got things like this. They've got ones with other rollers that you put on automated systems or non-automated systems. So there's quite a range going on in Ukraine. Right, moving on to troops. Marshal Richard Knighton stated, so he's British Army dude, has stated that the British Army has, British Army dude, by the way, is an official, somewhere between brigadier and lieutenant colonel. Yeah, anyway, dude has sufficient resources to participate in the deployment of a multinational force in Ukraine after the ceasefire. I guess he's going to have to say this, but he is claiming that we are not overstretched. We will be able to. We've got enough resources to provide for a Ukrainian post ceasefire coalition of willing force. Now, guaranteed that the UK will struggle in terms of overstretch in personnel terms. But he says the army will not be overloaded despite missions elsewhere, but noted that he cannot guarantee complete safety for soldiers. British soldiers would not be overstretched, he says. So, I hope that's true, but I think there's probably a need for greater recruitment in the UK armed forces. Spanish Prime Minister Sanchez, who's evidently visited Zelensky recently, has said that after the war in Ukraine ends, his country is ready to send troops to participate in the peacekeeping missions. So the Spanish are on board as well. That's brilliant. He made his promise at a meeting at the Coalition of the Willing in Paris. It's in Paris, where UK and France have already expressed their support, according to DW. So that's fabulous. From the Spanish, we know the French and the British and other nations are gearing up to support. Ukraine is accelerating plans to operate beyond NATO, with Ukraine-focused coalition of the willing emerging as a possible backbone for the new US independent security order, according to Politico. So Trump's Greenland threats push Europe towards divorcing America is a headline from, I presume, is that the New York Times or the Politico? EU officials are leaning toward negotiation rather than retaliation after Trump threatened tariffs. Okay, the key, why I've included this here, is that you might see the coalition of the willing. So now we understand Spanish, British, French, whoever else, and then we've got Swedes and Belgians with air capabilities being brought to bear, and then Turkish in the sea, possibly Romanians and Bulgarians in the Black Sea as well, and I think British and Norwegians. So what you have essentially is a framework for a NATO alternative. And if you can somehow codify that support, are we seeing Europe have the ability to replace NATO? So if Trump keeps going in the direction he is going, and you see the end of NATO, it might be that actually they're putting things in place at the moment to make sure that beyond NATO, that actually you could just say, right, let's take NATO, let's take all the framework for NATO, just we won't include the United States, it'll be a European thing. Is everyone still in? Everyone in Europe? Yes. You in Turkey goes, yeah, might as well. And then suddenly you've got a replacement to NATO. And it could be that actually what's providing the roadmap for that is the assistance to Ukraine. And it's a really useful, practical test for a non-US kind of NATO. Okay. The EU, according to Ursula von der Leyen, will become a military powerhouse. So the Commission president told her centre-right allies that the EU will have its own security strategy this year. It's working to become a military powerhouse. This is very sensible. It's going to appease the right anyway, in terms of she's on the centre-right. Most, a lot of the establishment politics in Europe is centre-right. So I know people think that I was having this argument with Jeff on the live stream last night about Brexit, and he's continued in the threads and whatnot. And I'm like, and he accused someone else, from Sophie from Belgium, of being on the left because she supports the UK in the EU. It's like in Britain, it became such a partisan thing that it largely, but not entirely, well, it didn't actually, but there was this idea that if you're pro EU, you're some kind of lefty. And it's like, if you think that that the EU is some kind of left-wing ideal. You don't understand the EU. It's a freaking, it started off as a kind of neoliberal economic fraternity, right? It is a free market enterprise. Like the free movement of people isn't like, oh, it's nice that people can move around Europe. Let's give them all, let's have, if you've got a European passport, you can move from A to B. No, it's a cornerstone of free market economics. You want free movement of labor, capital, services, and, you know, goods, etc., etc. That is a trade block that where you have no barriers to entry to markets. It is an absolute economic ideal. It's nothing to do with being left or right. But the problem is these days, because everything's like, well, if you like this, you're woke and lefty. It's like, mate, just grow up. Let's talk. I'm not saying Jeff needs to grow up, but what I am saying is that if you're going to accuse a European for just being on the left because she shows that actually she's got an appetite for European unity through the EU, then I don't think you understand. Because when you look at the big players, the movers and the shakers in the European Parliament, they are on the right. They're the center right. Like Emmanuel Macron is a center right guy. He's not some kind of liberal lefty. And Ursula von der Leyen, you know, former, you know, banker and defense, German defense ministers. You know, these people are oftentimes in the center. So here she's talking to her center right allies and saying, we're going to make this a military powerhouse. And actually, you could see that in terms of economic stimulus. That's what Germany's trying to do at the moment. I think is what Britain's trying to do in terms of building up military manufacturing to stimulate the economy when the economy's been flatlining. And I believe it's working to some degree in Germany. Quote, we know that we need to be strong and strength, what strength means. We are not a military powerhouse, but we are building up to be a military powerhouse, she told lawmakers from her own centre-right European People's Party grouping. Quote, but we are an economic powerhouse and we have to improve our performance over and over and over. Like it's like a business, that it stays an economic powerhouse, she said, according to several sources in the room. Her comments come as a Danish and Greenlandic delegation is poised to meet, blah, 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 blah. So, you know, this is a really interesting situation whereby Ursula von der Leyen, the EU, can use Ukraine as a springboard, support of Ukraine as a springboard to economic stimulus and providing a European alternative to NATO, and then having Europe have its own national security strategy and maybe even European army that is the replacement to NATO. And this is all kind of fitting into place now. And what the United States is doing through Trump is shooting itself in the foot because it's losing all its friends and therefore it loses all its influence. So if you then have a European alternative to NATO, you don't need American forces in Europe. So all American forces just end up leaving Europe. You don't have American nuclear capabilities in RAF Lakenheath and elsewhere in the UK. You don't have European influence in Europe and the EU and UK and elsewhere. You don't get they're maybe doing this NATO, all these NATO training exercises and drills and you know, both in land, sea, land, sea and air, that you don't have the access to the Suez Canal through the Mediterranean in the way that you would. You don't have access to North Africa or Africa in general, the Middle East in general, Eurasia, because suddenly you don't exist in Europe because NATO's fallen apart. Why? Because you said that Europe wasn't doing enough for security. So then Europe does do enough for security. It stands up on its own 2 feet, becomes an economic powerhouse, but becomes a military powerhouse. And suddenly the United States is nowhere to be seen. It's like, well, this is your bed. You need to lie in it, she would say to Trump. So you're going to probably have a lot of people pulling their hair out in the Pentagon saying, this is not cool for American security going forwards. Yes, we wanted the EU, or yes, we wanted not just the EU, we wanted European and other allies, like Canadian allies, to pay more for their defense. Yes, we wanted that. But no, we didn't want it to go so far that they told us to bugger off and they made up their own club without us. But you've got this idea that's going to be the direction of travel. Anyway, I was going to say, I digress. I'm exactly on point. Okay, just checking some of the live chat, see what you guys are up to. I was just wondering, is Sophie was in the live chat there, because she often is, but I can't see her. I just wondering if she saw that comment thread that I was involved in. I appear to have a baby screaming behind me coming from the door behind. So if you can hear, I don't know. Oh no, she looks like she's gone. So sorry for any audio interruptions there. Okay, now we have France is pressing European allies to develop long-range strike capabilities that run counter to Russia's Oreshnik intermediate-range ballistic missiles, with Moscow, which Moscow has now used twice against Ukraine. You remember the last usage of the Oreshnik was a very overt statement to Europe, right? It was not really anything to do with striking things in Lviv. It was like, we can fire this Oreshnik really close to your European borders. What are you going to do about it? So France is like, Macron is like, yeah, what are we going to do about it? What do we have to counter the Oreshnik, and what do we have that's an equivalent to Oreshnik? Do we have any missiles and whatnot that can go that far? So interesting stuff. Now, remember Macron the other day, and I talked at length about this morning in my hits and losses video, but Macron talked about France now providing 2/3 of Ukrainian intelligence in terms of satellites intelligence and whatnot. And I talked about this interview that took place on LCI between Vincent Cruzet, former intelligence agent there, and Reiter. He was saying that we are now, well, Macron said we are now providing 2/3 of Ukrainian intelligence. And he said, my inference is that the other third is UK and Germany. In other words, it could be in a situation where the US isn't actually providing any or much intelligence to Ukraine. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I want to just, and I have already read this to you today, but this is a different video and possibly with a different audience. So I just want to reiterate what he talked about with regard to the provision of intelligence by the French, because it's pretty interesting. So he's talking about this SIGINT intelligence, and we're going to come down to here. So the second dimension implies that through our two intelligence services, which have these sensors precisely abroad, the DGSE led, so these French intelligence services led by Nicolas Lerner on the one hand, and the DRM led by General Langlade de Moncro, have the capabilities to precisely drive these efforts with the Ukrainians. So we are becoming the leading partners in terms of intelligence for Ukraine. So first, with thanks to electromagnetic intelligence, SIGINT, we are capable of providing to the Ukrainians. We have a dozen electromagnetic interception stations that are piloted by the DGSE, controlled by the DGSE. So the one in Dom that we see right now on the screen, there are two very large stations, the one in Dom and the one on Albion Plateau, through which we are capable of capturing everything, almost all Hertzian, so gigahertz, Hertzian communications radio. But we are also capable of retrieving emails, monitoring everything happening on apps and digital platforms, etc. So it is a considerable help, and we are capable of widening the spectrum of our surveillance to the entire Russian and Ukrainian space, thus monitoring all the almost Hertzian communications that the Russians might produce in the theatre of operations. France knows how to do that. Yes, France knows how to do that. Obviously not at the level of the NSA, the Americans, that's obvious, but we do have the capacity. It's what we call SIGINT, signal intelligence, which we're quite capable of producing for the benefit of the Ukrainians. And the second thing is geospatial intelligence, or GeoInt. That is to say, all the sensors, space, terrestrial, maritime, aerial, that we can provide to the Ukrainians to map, to identify targets they can strike. Because to go back to their relationship with the Americans refused to provide them with the slightest intelligence for the purpose of strikes on Russian soil. Now, this is me speaking. I don't know if that's still the case, but the idea from this French guy is that the Americans weren't allowing them to strike on Russian soil, so we've been providing them with the intelligence. Now, when we've heard about what the necessities that why it's necessary to still have the Americans on board, what is it the Ukrainians rely on with regard to the USA still? The one thing that comes up is, generically kind of intelligence and satellite mapping, but it seemed like the more important thing was incoming ballistic missile early warning systems. That's what the Americans do that no one else appears to be able to do, at least as well as the Americans. And so if the Russians are sending ballistic missiles into Ukraine, it's the Americans that help with that. But it could be, if this guy's correct, if we can believe him, it could be that it's the French that are allowing the Ukrainians to do all of their targeting inside of Russia and inside occupied territories. It could be that the French are way more important than we ever gave them credit for being previously. Now, as I said earlier today, I did give the French credit for this right throughout the time when people were slagging off the French. I was like, they do provide intelligence. They do have pretty decent intelligence. But it could be that actually they're now providing like the crucial intelligence to allow Ukraine to strike within Russia. It's not the Americans that are doing that. It's actually the French. And you've had Macron very publicly saying we provide 2/3 of this intelligence to Ukraine without specifying who the other third is. I mean, it's fascinating stuff. So this guy's now giving us the details. So he says, and perhaps all the strikes or a large part of the Ukrainian strikes on Russian soil were determined based on intelligence that we may have provided to them. Of course, there's a word perhaps in there, right? But still, like there is a case where all of their strikes in Russia are contingent upon French intelligence. So this intelligence, he says, which is quite important to the space front, is done thanks to the optical space component called CSO3. CSO3, which provides optical imagery with very high resolution infrared by day as well as by night, allowing us therefore to help the Ukrainians in their targeting day to day. And soon we have the geostationary satellite called Yoda, which will allow us to precisely increase this capability. And finally, you got human intelligence, we said, which we aren't so involved in, blah blah blah. So thank you for Benny Pie for translating. This is what he did with a bit of AI help. He translated the video and the French transcript and then all the timestamps and everything. So thank you, Benny. That's absolutely brilliant, because this was a fascinating interview. And if you hadn't translated this for me, it would have gone by the wayside. So thank you for that. Now, the French guy did claim that there have been intelligence leaks to the US coming from Ukraine, which has been repudiated by both Ukrainian sources and elsewhere, I think, but predominantly by Ukrainian sources. Either, as I said earlier, they were claiming that was false due to the embarrassment of it, and it might cause an issue with the Americans, or because it is actually false. So I don't know about that. But anyway, I'll leave that for another day. But I think the intelligence provided by the French is super important. Right, okay, then we're going to come on to this. Saab offers, and this isn't anything to do with Ukraine per se, but it's the whole US is pissing everyone off. So, or sorry, the Trump administration is. So, what does Canada do with regard to their F-35 procurement? They're going to buy 88. Now they're contractually obliged to buy 16. What do they do with the rest? And Saab is trying to sweeten them and say, look, we can build Saab jets, and it'd be even better if they have the Rolls-Royce engines in rather than the American engines. So if we can build Saab Gripens in Canada, so you can have 10,000 jobs. And they're also throwing in this. So Saab is offering 72 Gripen fighters and 6 Global Eye aircraft to Canada. Why this is important? So Saab Global Eye, they've got 2 of these, or Saab equivalents, I don't know, they're the exact Global Eyes, operating in Ukraine. So the Swedish have been really integral in providing this intelligence to the Ukrainians. And this I think is a very important plane, because the American equivalent, the kind of the new AWACS, I think is suffering from loads of delays. Am I correct? This is just my memory, but I have a feeling the American Boeing Wedgetail, is it the Wedgetail, is like they are failing to get that to people as quickly as they need them. And this is leading people to go, well, screw that, let's have the Global Eye from Sweden. And this is a decent plane by all accounts, and it does a really good job. And especially in this atmosphere of, well, not too sure about American military equipment anymore, they're becoming an unreliable partner, will they turn the switch off? Well, if Saab are producing Global Eyes and these are good, then I think you're going to get European procurement of Global Eyes, and I think you're likely to get Canada taking on these as well, or at least wouldn't surprise me. Now, people saying, Canada needs Gripens. I would like Canada to get Gripens, have some F-35s that they're obliged to buy. Gripens are not as good as the F-35s on most metrics, but it's horses for courses. So, uh, you don't use, you don't necessarily need to have, horses for courses. So an F-35 will be good, better than the Gripen across the board mainly, but actually in certain contexts, and maybe taken off from roads in Canada, being operated in those Arctic conditions and whatever, the Gripens will have some kind of advantage, maybe here, a little bit of an advantage over there, maybe some cost advantages here, or whatever. It is, it is easy to say, well, the F-35 is better than the Gripen, but actually they don't do the same things all the time, and so on and so forth. People point towards the idea that in some tests, the Gripen have beaten F-35s in dogfights, real close dogfights, but the F-35 is not designed to do dogfights, right? It's designed to shoot the Gripen before the Gripen can get anywhere close to having a dogfight. So, and in that case, it would do that. So, yeah, I know it's cool to say Gripens are better, because we don't want to say, oh, F-35, the American plane is better, but in reality, most of the tests appear to show that the F-35 is better, which is kind of what you'd expect. They are upgrading the Gripen, of course, and you've got the Gripen EF, and then you've got constant upgrading to that. So it depends what equipment you got on which plane anyway. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that one in there. And it would be, I think, useful to Canada, for Canada to have Gripens. And of course, if you're going to have then manufacturing facilities in Canada, then there's an economic incentive to have that as well. You're getting closer to Europe, and it sends a really big signal to the United States. And what you'd then hope is that the manufacturers of the F-35 will go and lobby Trump and say, what are you doing, Donald? You are ruining our business model. I mean, the thing about F-35s, though, is they are building them at a clip. So the production numbers of F-35s, what is it? They're building one every 2 days, is it? Just less than 2 days or something like that. Really, they're really building them very quickly, and they are getting them to people that want them. They've really ramped up manufacturing. So that's something to take into account. Anyway, I probably am digressing from Ukraine aid here. We're going to go on to, so let's just see what you guys say. F-35 is undetectable to Russian radar. Gripen is very detectable to Russian radar, says Democrat Rob. But although Democrat Rob, though, as we've heard before, is not a Democrat by all accounts, I think he's very much a Trump supporter. So take that with a pinch of salt. But yeah, there are going to be advantages for either, but you're not going to have the American kill switch and so on and so forth. Now, going on to a bit of energy support, Ukraine no longer has a single fully operational power plant. Energy Minister Shmyhal said. He also noted fuel supplies that cover more than 20 days and imports continue. Gas restrictions are not in place, though, and police are stepping up patrols to maintain order. Businesses are asked to turn off holiday lights. So this was a few days ago, the 16th that was announced. We've subsequently heard today, have I got it here? No. So I reported this morning that the entire energy infrastructure in Ukraine is relying on 3 nuclear power stations. One in Khmelnytsky, one in Pivdeniskoye, one somewhere else, right? Which is to say that the Russians haven't struck the nuclear power plants for obvious reasons, but they've struck everything else. So, I don't want to be too doom saying here, but I've told you many, many times that the pressure cookers, the 2 pressure cookers, Ukraine has energy and personnel, Russia has economy and personnel and equipment as well. But the economy is a big one. Ukraine, the big one is their energy infrastructure. And Russia has at the moment is winning, I think, the pressure battle. And that's happened relatively quickly. There's been a big turnaround over the last probably 3 months, or certainly over the winter period, where Russia has really been successful. They've ramped up production of drones and missiles, I think, and have, compared to several years ago. So Ukraine was able to keep their energy infrastructure going in year 1, year 2, and year 3, the 4th winter. So winter 2022, 23, 24. Winter 2025 is where the energy sector got absolutely destroyed. It has been destroyed, right? And that's because they have, compared to the other years, although Ukraine has kept their drone manufacturing to a level, it's still ramped up massively from what it was. More drones, better techniques, and tactics, better technology on the drones, more missiles, more ability to counter solutions to these drones and missiles. So they have been effective in taking out Ukrainian energy plants and substations. Substations are much harder to protect. You know, they're not one thing. There are lots of things all over the place that really you can kind of take out relatively easily. Like a Shahed drone will take out a substation in a way that it probably won't take out a power plant, right? You're going to need some serious missiles to take out a power plant effectively. So the substations are easy pickings. The Ukrainians are doing a great job of that at the moment, but Russia's a massive country. Ukraine is a smaller country than Russia, and therefore it's like shooting fish in a barrel compared to Ukraine trying to do that to Russia, where it's trying to fire things in all directions, and you know, it can't use Belarus as help, whereas Russia can, and so on and so forth. So there's an asymmetry there where Russia has the advantage in striking Ukraine's energy compared to Ukraine striking Russia's energy. They have more missiles and drones that can do this than the Ukrainians are able to use, and they are having success. And Ukraine is in a hell of a bind at the moment, because when we go on to talk about what Ukraine is building militarily, and there's some great news, they're bringing all these different things online. The reality is you can't build those things if 50% of the day you have no power. So people said that I contest. People said that Denis Shmyhal took a demotion from defense secretary, from prime minister to defense secretary to energy secretary. I'd say energy secretary is your most important job in Ukraine right now. He's got one hell of a job. Honestly, it's desperate, and they need power to build machines and weapons to fight the war. Without power, you have no commerce, you have no industry, you don't make money, you don't make tax dollars. And you don't build equipment. It's desperate, right? So as a result, they've convened this energy Ramstein. So the Ramstein is normally the label for the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, which is all these 50 allies of Ukraine. They get together. How much can you help Ukraine? Well, we can give this, we can give that. Then every so often they give a bunch of stuff to Ukraine. That's Ramstein. Now they're doing an energy Ramstein. Quote, we expect to receive additional contributions and specific commitments from allies, said the head of the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry, Andrei Sybiha. UK announces, so from this, and this isn't exhaustive, I'm sure there's loads more than this, just a couple of reflections of what's going on. UK seems to have given the most actually at the moment. UK has announced £20 million for Ukraine's energy infrastructure as the two countries mark 1 year, the 100-year partnership in Kiev, and that was the gov.uk saying that. Italy has begun delivering high-capacity industrial boilers, 550 to 3,000 kilowatt ones worth of 1.85 million euros to help Ukraine's hardest-hit communities, confirms Sybiha. He emphasized that in response to Russia's winter terror, Ukraine is operating in emergency mode to secure energy support. So Zelensky has said this is a state of emergency, and Sybiha is saying we are operating in emergency mode. So take it from the Ukrainians that it's that freaking desperate, right? So, like, let's not beat around the bush. I don't want to be too doomy, but it is an absolute disaster in the Ukrainian energy sector right now. Italy, as mentioned, is donating a load of heating equipment to help Ukraine cope for the rest of the winter and beyond. At first, 78 industrial boilers with a total capacity of 116.5 megawatts are being delivered. In the second stage, you'll see another 300 boilers with a total capacity of 806 megawatts handed over. Work to restore all of Kiev continues. There's still 30 buildings not connected 9 days after a huge Russian attack. And of course, you know, when things are not connected for that much time, then they get frozen and it makes it even harder, and you get, you know, burst pipes and all sorts. So things are not good in and across Ukraine, actually. And now Germany is providing, oh no, here's a bigger one than the UK, actually. I forgot this one. Germany is providing 60 million euros to support heating in frontline regions, according to Sybiha, thanking Berlin for the steady solidarity. Again, Germany, absolutely brilliant. Ukraine is battling its worst energy crisis since the full-scale invasion. So Germany coming out the goods. And then it's happening from a kind of a civilian point of view. So thousands of Poles have rallied to help purchase 100 power generators and power plants for Kiev. The amount of funds raised is growing with every minute, which is absolutely fantastic. And indeed, we hear that Warmth from Poland, which is this group and movement, more than $650,000 was raised to buy generators for Kiev amid an energy crisis. After reaching the initial target, organizers increased the goal to 2 million zloty, which has been surpassed with donations now. That's $550,000, exceeding $660,000. So that's absolutely fantastic from the Polish citizens there coming together to help in the with the energy crisis. Now, people have said, "Oh, should we fundraise to get generators and whatnot to Ukraine?" And yeah, that would be cool. But just at the moment, I don't have the headspace to be able to change what we're doing. I just want to remind you, and I showed this to you this morning. I don't know if I've got this to hand. Oh, we've got a few interesting things. Oh yeah, that one. Okay, no. I just want to show you this video because it's kind of relevant to what we're talking about, which is civilian assistance to Ukraine. And this here is, oh no, you're not going to be able to hear that because I need to remove that and add it with sound. So there you go. I know you've seen this already, but this is what we did. We fundraise. Okay, it's just one ATV, well, actually two amongst the three different channels for these guys up in Sumy area. But we're doing our little.
Hi everyone from Sumy region. Today we are delivering a second quad bike for the our fundraiser for quad bikes for 80 separate air assault brigade. Thank you all for supporting this fundraiser. Thanks to you, we raised over $33,000. Thanks to our great donors from Toonie Tuesday, we bought this first blue ATV earlier and delivered it to the drone team. It was already on missions delivering equipment to the positions because logistics is very complicated here. And ATVs are super popular to use in forests in Sumy region and near Russian Kursk. And today we just delivered the second one, the new red one just behind me, which we fundraised for thanks to our beautiful friends, Jonathan Pierce from ATP Geopolitics and Jonathan Fink from Silicon Cartoon Podcast, both from the UK, both our great friends who raised almost $15,000 actually for another second quad bike. Thank you very much for your donations. Every dollar counts, and thanks to you, we bought 2 ATVs and delivered them before the end of year. I hope the guys use them throughout the winter. It's snowing heavily here around Sumy, so they're just having fun while we are filming this report, riding around in circles, and of course, they will be put to the missions right after that. Slava Ukraini!
And that's brilliant, and thank you to you guys who have allowed that to happen. I'm just I don't want to be like overly sensitive to any criticism, but Daniel Hendrick says the military industry have generators, and I'm going to answer that in a second because then we have Gary Greger saying JP doesn't understand military industry. So, okay, they've got, okay, it's all fine. So the idea here is that military industry is fine. They've got generators. Okay, there's no issue. I don't understand military industry. I do apologize. The thing is, Gary, no offense, and I know you're a great supporter of the channel, but like it's easy to criticize. The Ukrainian government has just said to Ukroboronprom that they have to get 50% of their electricity from abroad. They have to import 50% of their electricity. So that is empirically false unless the Ukrainian government is lying in what they're telling the defense industry to do. So they're saying to the defense industry, we are so screwed for energy, and so are you, that you on your own are going to have to go and import 50% of your electricity. Now, if there was no problem, if they just got generators, because when you talk about the military industry, we're talking about like steel forges and furnaces and the amount of power you need for that. You can't just whack a diesel generator to like forge steel, right? So like it's way more than that. All of the components, the military industry, like is the entire supply chain. It's not just like one factory that's assembling some missile parts. It's the entire supply chain that is responsible for putting together. I mean, I think I understand military industry enough to know that Ukraine's energy crisis is going to affect their ability to build stuff. Like, and your workers can't get to work because the electric trains and the trams aren't working or whatever. right? So just like, by all accounts, I don't understand military industry, maybe, but you need to be a bit more specific, because the Ukrainians themselves are telling us that they are struggling in the very industries you're talking about. So they have said Ukroboronprom, Ukrainalizistia, whatever how you pronounce it, the Ukrainian train services, and Naftogaz. So the gas industry that is providing energy for the military industrial complex has to get 50% of their energy from abroad now. So we've had the Ukrainian government that's very clearly stated that we can infer, if we're going to use inference here, we will infer that the Ukrainian industry is in severe trouble, and it really is. And you speak to anyone who knows about this, about what's going on in Ukraine, there is a massive energy crisis. You speak to anyone. Local generators are great. You can keep your lights on, you can keep your cafe running, right? But you're not running a freaking steel forge, or you're not running a massive enterprise that is really intense energy. You need intensive energy to do so, and so it is. I think it really is desperate at the moment. And yeah. So yeah, sorry, I don't mean to get all like defensive. I am very defensive, aren't I, like that? But it is like, yeah. Yeah. So there you go. I don't know if you guys agree with that. Just seeing there's any experts here that actually know about sort of generators and whatnot. But I'm they will have generators, and they will have contingency plans, because if you are the Ukrainian government, you will want your military industrial industry to have priority, right? So you will put contingencies in place such that they can still operating as much as they can. But remember, it's a whole supply chain. There's someone that's just making small components for this in some small warehouse over there that might be in a bit of trouble, might not be part of the contingency, but actually that's a really important component for the piece of kit. Local generators might keep the light and coffee machine on, but heavy industry, no. There was a plan to concert diesel train engines to be turned into generators, but I think it didn't work out somehow to convert. Sorry, yes. Yeah, interesting. Cool beans. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there are some. So, there are these generators that are being provided at the moment that are really good, and what you need is enough of these around the whole of Ukraine. So they're starting to get these large generators into, say, Kiev, to provide energy for entire blocks of flats. So yeah, there are ways around this, but there's absolutely no doubt that if the Ukrainian government is telling their actual military industry that they need to get energy from elsewhere, they need to get, they're in trouble, right? So it's that simple. Right, so that's the energy side of things. We're going to go on to Ukraine now. How am I doing for time? Oh, I do not have long left, so I'm going to pretty much rush through this. So this is Ukrainian, their own industry. Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Mikhailo Fedorov, at the beginning of the invasion, there were 7 companies in Ukraine making drones. Today, there are 500 companies. Remember, 500 companies, all of those are going to be using energy. So if you're talking about just drones, there are 500 drone companies. Do all of those have contingencies for production, for energy? As for electronic warfare, there were 2 companies. Today are 200. So that's 7. So 500 drone companies, 200 electronic warfare companies. Do all of them have consistent access to energy 24/7? And the answer is no. Then there is a problem. There were no private companies producing missiles at all. Interesting. So over the past 6 months, we have transferred 2,200,000 drones to the army. So that one would assume they're on course for over sort of 4.5 million drones over the year to the Ukrainian armed forces, which is absolutely staggering. What an incredible ramping up of production. And of course, oops, I just need to hang on. Sorry, my sons were having a I don't know, Fortnite argument next door. Norway wants to integrate Ukrainian interceptors into NASAMS air defense systems, according to the foreign minister. Norway is working intensively to provide Ukraine with more missiles, as well as develop partnerships with Ukrainian defense manufacturers. This is really, really important. If they can produce their own indigenous missiles for air defense systems like NASAMS, which is a successful, decent air defense system, then that is going to be superb. It's all about producing their own stuff eventually, including the air defense systems themselves. Now, the Ukrainian Raybird reconnaissance drone with an electric motor running on hydrogen fuel was involved in carrying out combat missions at the front. Wow, so we've got hydrogen fuel now being used. The production Raybird, powered by an internal combustion engine, allows for a flight duration of over 28 hours. That looks like quite a sizable drone as well. At the same time, the hybrid version of the drone can operate in the air for about 12 hours as of January 2026. Engineers are currently working on increasing this figure to 20 hours. That is pretty cool. Now, thanks to Thierry, who has sent me a video that gives us the numbers. I've not finished watching it all. I'm about halfway through this. But there is a really good interview which is dubbed into English by Stevius from this last week that gives you all of the Ukrainian manufactured IMVs, mobility vehicles and whatnot that they're using themselves, and then the figures, domestic production figures. So I need to look into these to next time get the production figures. But remember, we had the claims recently from the Ukrainians that they are now producing IMVs, particularly armored vehicles, to a significant enough degree. I presume it just comes down to money and orders that they do not need. In principle, they do not need any such vehicles given to them from abroad. So they've ramped up production enough that they can produce all of their own MRAPs and IMVs and whatnot, which is phenomenal. So it's a really big video that looks at each of these vehicles and goes into details about what each of them do, what the designs are, when they start using things like the Kozak 2, the Novator, etc., etc. Really good looking video. Thanks for Thierry for sending that one to me. But anyway, going back here, Ukrainian defense firm Ukramo Tech delivered 402 armored vehicles to the military in December. 402 armored vehicles to the military in December. That's bloody 10 a day, including 333 Gyoza 01s, 30 Gyoza 02s, 24 UAT Fox, and 16 UAT teasers, light armored pickups. Production continues at full pace under active contracts. Like, does that mean by December? I mean, if that's in December, they are producing absolutely tons of this stuff. So yeah, they are. It looks like they are getting an awful lot of these Ukrainian-owned produced equipment. Ukrainian company Mac Hub has unveiled the Mac Owl armored combat vehicle. The project was implemented in cooperation with the South African company Paramount Group. So there's another one to add here. The Mac Owl is an armored combat vehicle with a protection level according to PZSA 6 anti-bullet protection and mine protection according to STANAG 4569 levels 3 and 3B, with the possibility of upgrading to levels 4 and 4A and 4B, which is they have these different levels of protection, and you know NATO will have their requirements, and interoperability means that you, as a NATO force, you're going to have X, Y, and Z. So that's what they're aiming for there. But anyway, really good stuff from the Ukrainians. Now I have a section on what the Russians are doing themselves. I'm going to leave that for the next video, just because I want to go through your comments, and then I have to drive my boy to football. So what do we have from you guys? Let's have a look. So thank you very much to Richard Bennett, 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships, and Kevin Ford. So you guys are just the stalwarts. I can't thank you enough. It's incredibly generous. It's just as simple as that. Arctic Dread says the Swedish American Institute is in Minneapolis. The real king, the king of Sweden, stays here when he visits. Why would Trump want to start a fight with the Vikings? So obviously a bit of Nordic solidarity going on there from the Swedes. Give Doris away from all of us as she walks by your window, Jonathan. No, that was a baby, Doris. Yes. Good old Doris. Who's popping? Relieved Trump went mask off. No more false hope. I think that letter from Trump is so freaking revealing. It's not about security, and it never was. And for a man to be so obsessed with a Nobel Peace Prize, and he says, right now, I'm not interested in peace. I'm what's interested in what's good for the United States of America. In other words, what's good for the United States of America is not peace. Like the way that sentence was constructed is that I am prepared to go to war for what is better for the United States of America. That was actually, when I reread it, it's a much more bellicose statement, a much more warlike statement. What Trump said in his letter to the Norwegian Prime Minister than on initial reading. It is a terrible thing to have stated, and I think is deeply worrying. So yeah, things are crazy at the moment. They're just crazy. Pirate says, please hit like, subscribe, and share on Blue Sky. I like the reference to Blue Sky there. I'm liking Blue Sky quite a lot. I can get most of my hits and losses stuff I get from Blue Sky. When I start going off into the world of politics, I still have to go a lot to Twitter, although I probably could find it on Blue Sky, and certain technical things. So, you know, if I look at all of my ones today, do you know what? Most of them, I'm probably 90% Blue Sky, and I've got a lot of tabs. Yeah, I think I'm 90% Blue Sky. So actually, that's good for quite a technical video on military aid. So that's good. Anyway, Benny Pie, please remember to sign atpgeo.com/UK petition. It is for UK citizens, but if you can't sign it, if you're not a UK citizen, please share it so that the British people do get a load of that and decide to they can choose to sign it themselves. So brilliant. Okay, let's have a look at what else you guys are saying. Please call your representatives, US House of Representatives, phone 202-224-3121, hands off Greenland. So go and give your American, so if you're not going to sign the UK petition because you're American, then instead go and phone your representatives and give them a peace of mind. Dan Smith, hey, all you amazing petition signing folks, if you shared it with your social media and friends, you magnify the vote by a huge factor. That's how we get to over 10,000 needed to get a government response. And that would be fantastic. I don't know what we're at already. Hopefully we're at something that's more than the 10 we had earlier. So we're up to 50 now. So we've multiplied it by 5 just in the time we've been, almost 5, probably 4 by the time we've been on. So that's fantastic. Gripums would be amazing for Canada, Ukraine. It would be a lot cheaper, so on and so forth. So that's good. I'm just going through the comments that Benny Pie has put out for me to look at. Can the F-35 launch from back roads like the Gripen? Ukraine has showed the world that diversifying your aircraft landing and takeoff areas is rather important. This is super important, and that's where the Gripen will have a bit of an advantage. I don't know how good the F-35 is for that, but the Gripen certainly can do that, and has a very small maintenance footprint. So you can look after a Gripen with like really hardly any maintenance crew, just living out of a container by the side of a road. Honestly, it's really good, and I think you can fuel them with the engine turned on as well. So there's a really quick turnaround for the Gripen too. Stuff like that is pretty advantageous, and it's right that actually diversifying for the airplanes is, you know, as long as you don't have too many, hasn't been too much of an issue for Ukraine. Japan is also waiting for equipment they paid for years ago. They're getting fed up. So Sarah World C is referencing something that's really important here. So Japan has just had a report come through that's something like, goodness me, what is it? Oh no, I'm not liar, but I'm going to get it wrong. Was it something like $19.8 billion of American purchases, military equipment purchases, have like not come through yet, and they are not happy at all, Japan, and it's really interesting. So there's also this idea that there could well be a very long waiting list for the US, and you know, they're not, obviously, if you look at the Japanese situation, they're not as reliable in providing you with the stuff even after you paid for it. Go and look into that, guys. I didn't have it ready for this video, but it is worth you looking at. Sarah World C is onto something there. Thank you very much for people like JT says, appreciate the ATP Geopolitics community. You guys are awesome. You are the best. King Raccoon says Germany is actually sending over $120 million worth of equipment. What else do we have? I think that's it. So that's fantastic. My son has got his football kit on, so I definitely have to go now. I appreciate all of you guys. You are brilliant. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Thank you for helping me keep the lights on myself. Although there are no power cuts here at the moment. Spare a thought for Ukrainians. We still have the I'm going to contact JR about the patch. We still have the Car for Ukraine campaign going on at the moment that you can overpay for, and they'll put that towards another vehicle. And please remember atpgeo.com/UK petition to sign that petition and help out with Mark's very worthwhile cause there. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you to the mods and to Benny Pie, who has been in the background helping out. Legend.